in sustainability, and we're very excited to have Mr. Scott Cabranchi, the sustainability leader with Sealed Air Corporation right here in Charlotte, to lead our meetup. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott, and he'll have a short presentation, and then it's going to be Q&A from you all. So feel free to unmute your microphones and ask your questions aloud, or you can put them in the chat window as well. And once again, thank you, Scott, for leading our meetup.
Oh yeah, thank you. I appreciate the time, and just to let everybody know before we jump into anything that one, I'll apologize if my dogs go crazy. It seems like it never fails that they feel like they have to comment on any kind of discussion I have with anybody online. So, but I thought what we would do today is I'll just take a couple of minutes to give you an idea about my background and some of the things that I work on at Sealed Air and sustainability. And then we'll kind of just open it up for general discussion or questions. We could dive as deep as you want. If there are any things that you have in mind or other topics you'd like to talk about, by all means. And while I'm talking, feel free, unmute yourself. You can interrupt, ask questions. You don't have to wait, or if you prefer to use chat, that's fine. But if you want to just speak out loud, by all means, that does not bother me in the least. So let me do this. I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. Let's see if it shares the right thing. Somebody give me some feedback if you would. Do you see full screen on my background?
Yeah, we can see full screen.
Okay, cool. Great, thanks. And this is just going to be very high level, just to give you an idea, because when we're looking at sustainability and something that Jay and I were just talking about, there's a little bit of a generational difference that people who are working in the field typically now, and people have some experience in it, usually didn't start out in sustainability. If you look back 10, 15, 20 years ago, there wasn't a sustainability program out there probably, or there wasn't a degree that you would normally get. So most of us came to sustainability through some torturous path or some other career option, whatever it might be, as opposed to what a lot of you are going through, which is really a nice system. And it shows you how important sustainability has become over the last several years, is that you're actually looking at the field, you're getting background, you're getting that education. It's more of a formal program. So there's some real advantages there, as opposed to some of us who kind of had to learn as we went, or just came in, and in my personal experience, came in totally cold, not that long ago in sustainability. So as I mentioned, my background is not sustainability. I'm a chemist by education. And I joined Sealed Air back in '91. I worked at Duke Energy for a couple of years, in fact, locally at Catawba Nuclear. And then I picked up with Sealed Air down in South Carolina, and spent most of my career down there in a number of different roles, primarily in the analytical testing group or in our pilot lab facility, which if you looked at it, it's like a smaller, slightly smaller. It's not small by any means. It's quite large, in fact, but it's just a scaled down version of a factory. And the pilot lab was used to develop new materials for the company. So I spent several years doing that, for the first 28 years of my career doing that, and eventually worked my way up into management. And I was responsible for a fairly large group that actually had both the analytical side, that would be global, so that was all the laboratories scattered throughout the planet, and then the pilot lab in Duncan. So I had about 65 people under me at one point, and a pretty large budget that I was responsible for. So a lot of different things. So I've been a bench chemist, I've been in management, but part of what I've always enjoyed doing, and I like to think that I'm comfortable doing it, is public speaking and presenting information and developing content. And so a couple of years ago, the company, with one of their reorganizations, they wanted to add resources into the sustainability team. So at the time, we only had a few people who were working on it full time as a permanent position. So we wanted to expand that group. So based on my background and the science part of it, plus the content development and other things that went along with it, I was asked to join that team. So right now, the team that I work on is what I'd call a global team. So we have people based here in Charlotte, which we used to work in the office, but now most of us all work from home. But the people on our team that I work with the most, we have one of my colleagues is based in Los Angeles. I have another colleague I work closely with in Milan, over in the UK in Kettering, and then my grand boss, if you want to look at it that way, he splits time between Ireland and France. So he's a little bit working from home, but his two homes in Ireland and France. But then I also work closely with colleagues in Sao Paulo and also down in Australia. So we try to cover the whole planet with our efforts, because sustainability is going to touch all that. And being a large company, of course, we want to make sure that we have all our bases covered. But one of the nice things about it is I do get to work with people all over. So there's that. So just to mention, and I'll go into a little bit of detail, but I don't want to dive too deep into that. And then you guys tell me what you want to talk about more, and we can do it. So if I had to bucket the activities that I do for the company and sustainability, a big part of what I do is what I would call customer engagement, and particularly on the retail side of the business, and even more particularly grocery stores, so and food sales. So I'm responsible for most of our sustainability activities along those lines. So Sealed Air makes a lot of food packaging. If you've been in a grocery store, you've probably seen our products. You may not notice it. We don't typically label things like that. It's a little bit more back of the house. But if you pick up meat in a tray, sometimes if you flip that over, if you see the brand name Cryovac, that's our material. But also any deli case that you see, that'll be our material. All sorts of food packaging that we do. So part of what I do is trying to work with customers directly and help them align their sustainability goals with ours to make sure that we do have that right alignment. You know, when we're doing, and realistically, you know, and let's be honest, sustainability is very important, right? You want to be committed to it, and it's something that you want to do, and it's good for the planet and it's good for people. But from a business perspective, it's also to help drive business, right? We're not going to be around if we don't sell products to people and if we can't drive business. So part of what I'm responsible for is making sure we align those goals, but how do we make sure that we can leverage that for business opportunities? So part of what I do is to work with customers to make sure that we're going down that right path, you know, and how do we advance those? Then also our customers, whether they're direct or indirect customers, they have a lot of questions about sustainability. You know, this is a relatively new field for most, particularly for our customers. And they, you know, if I had to kind of take a stereotype for it, and we joke about this a little bit at work, but, you know, I'll go in to visit a customer. Say I go into Aldi's corporate headquarters and I go talk to their sustainability people, or I talk to their procurement people and with one of our salespeople or our field reps. And we're talking about materials and sustainability. And, you know, the cliched response from them is, well, I just want something sustainable. I don't know what, and I don't know how, but give me something sustainable, you know, or I have these sustainability goals, but, you know, part of it is greenhouse gas emissions. And is your product, tell me about your product and the greenhouse gas emissions from this barrier bag that I'm buying from you or something. So we get a fair amount of those type of inquiries from our customers. And then it's our responsibility to figure out, is this more from a marketing standpoint? Are you trying to tell a story that you can use with consumers so that you could further advance your sustainability story? Or do you really need hardcore numbers because you're going to report this in some kind of sustainability report at the end of the year? So that's one of the activities that I spend a fair amount of time on, actually. In fact, this week alone, well, I'm sorry, the next 2 weeks, I have about and these are short meetings, but I have about 25 customer meetings that we're ramrodding through to have like this series of 20-minute meetings with customers to start this ball rolling and start these conversations, or to provide them additional information. So that's one. Another one, which kind of goes hand in hand with it, is content development. You know, a big part of what you do in sustainability, or as a scientist, or in anything really, marketing, whatever you might be doing as you move from, you know, your educational career to your professional career, is how do you tell that story? How do you present information? You can have the best solution, the best idea, or whatever it might be, but if you can't develop the content and share that content in a clear and concise way for people to kind of rally behind your idea, or to accept what you're trying to sell them as far as the idea or the path forward it might be, then you're not really accomplishing what you hope to. So a fair amount, again, of what I do is that content development. You know, how do we best share that information with our customers, or how do we share that with consumers? And, you know, that might involve working with marketing teams, or technical people, or R&D team, or any number of different groups. It kind of crosses over everything, and then you want to be able to boil that down to the best way to tell that story. So I do that. Part of what I do is also kind of what I'm doing here, public speaking. You know, how do we take this out? Do we meet with NGOs? Are we making presentations at conferences, or hosting webinars to share information on a broad scale? So I get involved in that as well. And then some of the more technical part of it is life cycle analysis. And that could be a real challenge at times, but trying to figure out, if you said, I have this barrier bag, or I have this tray, or whatever it might be, or the bubble film that Sealed Air makes, that, you know, how do I know, is that a green product or not? And so what you'd have to do is do the actual analysis, so life cycle analysis on that, and try and figure out. Now, that can go anywhere from you're just looking at the materials and figure out, well, this material is better than that material. You know, it's 20% lighter, or you can go all the way cradle to grave, where it starts with pulling oil out of the ground and turning that into polymer, and then shipping that polymer to a manufacturing site in Simpsonville, South Carolina, and then making that into a roll of film, and then shipping that to Iowa Park, Texas, and then take that, and it goes to a processor, et cetera, et cetera. But work through the whole process, plus, if it's for food packaging, plus the food packaging, plus the food that you're putting into the package. And then what happens when it goes to the consumer and they pull the food out and they eat it? And then what do they do with the package? Does it get thrown away? Does it get recycled, or whatever it might be? Because what will happen is, if you don't go through that process, and you start making decisions on sustainability without looking at as much of that process as possible, you may be making the wrong decision. You know, sometimes the easy answer is not the right answer. And I'll give you a quick example. I was in a meeting with Walmart, and we were talking about sustainability and produce packaging. And what they were talking about was like fresh produce. So they had, you know, trays of blueberries, say, and they were examining what should you put these trays of blueberry? What kind of tray should you use for these blueberries? So they had two choices. They could use a fiber tray, or they could use a PET tray, polyethylene terephthalate tray, a plastic tray. And, you know, if you asked the average consumer, or you just kind of looked at it and thought about it for a second, say, well, the fiber, that's got to be better, right? It's sustainable, it's renewable, and everything else that goes along with it. And then, oh, we want less plastic. No, don't use the PET tray. But when you actually went through the process and said, well, how much damage is there? You know, can I recycle the fiber versus can I recycle the PET? How much water do they use to make fiber? How much water do they use to make the PET? How much energy and everything that goes along with it? Turns out the right answer is the PET tray, not the fiber. But if you aren't going through that process and actually doing the calculations and putting in the legwork to figure that out, you may make the wrong choice, and what we typically refer to is you may get unintended consequences. So spend a fair amount of time doing that. And believe me, I am not the only one in our group doing all these. We all kind of take a piece of this at different times. Some of the other things that I work closely with one of my colleagues, my Terry Grill, who works out of Los Angeles, is on our regulatory environmental reporting. So if you're familiar with CDP or EcoVadis or SEDEX, and if you've never heard of these organizations, don't worry about it, because these are the three that we report to, but there are dozens and dozens of others that other companies report to. But typically what companies are doing is, you think about publicly held companies, stock investors want to know, are they investing in companies that are reputable, that are doing the right thing? But also, it's been found, data would suggest that companies that do the right thing, that are keeping track of their greenhouse gas emissions, that are planning for the future environmental issues that we deal with, whether it's water or greenhouse gas emissions or energy, whatever, financially do better in the long haul. So there are all sorts of organizations that kind of track this information that you have to report to every year, and basically you get a score on it. And then these big investors on Wall Street are looking at these scores. So when they're trying to figure out that they have billions of dollars to invest, like they have the California Teachers Retirement Fund that they're holding $12 billion of, and they're trying to figure out what to invest in. They look at it on two sides of the business. One, they're going to look at the financial returns, because that's what they do for a living, right? Our job is to make money as an investment house. So they're going to look at that financially. But the other side of it is there's a firewall there, and there's another group entirely that's going to say, yeah, but we want to invest in the right kind of companies. We don't want to pick companies that are poisoning the environment, or aren't planning for the future, or aren't doing these environmentally sound activities. So they got to vote in the matter too. And so you have both of these groups inputting into whether you're going to get any of that $12 billion from the BlackRock or somebody who's investing that retirement money. So when you do this work, you better make sure you got your ducks in a row, and you want to make sure you're getting the right score, and you're getting all the right information, and you're doing the right thing as a company. So Terry and I, in fact, we're hard and heavy right now getting started on our CDP report that we have to do every year. And then the last one I'll just mention is working with trade organizations and NGOs, trying to figure out how to advance sustainability efforts. And the big takeaway from that would probably be that there isn't a single company that can solve this problem, right? If you talk about sustainability, whether it's packaging or plastic or greenhouse gas emissions, whatever it is, and we're of course most interested in the packaging side of it and the plastic side for the most part, but a fair amount of fiber we do as well. But when you look at that and look at the challenges that we all face going forward, I don't care how big a company you have, you can't solve it by yourself. Sealed Air could design a product that is the perfect package to be recycled, but if it's not collected at curbside, or it doesn't go through the recycler at the MRF, or whatever it might be, then it's not accomplishing anything, right? So we want to make sure that we're all headed in the right direction. We're all working together to try and solve these challenges that we face. And so we also need to work with the NGOs, which aren't always on our side, right? Some of them are pretty aggressive, and they take a very dim look at some of the things that Sealed Air produces, and in point blank, if you ask some of them, they'd rather we weren't in business anymore. But that's not really solving the problem. You could ban plastic, but then when your food waste went up by 50%, it's actually going to be much worse for the environment than if you allowed that plastic to package the food and protect it accordingly. So we want to make sure that, again, we're working together, but also that we're all making informed decisions, and not having knee-jerk reactions and having these unintended consequences. So, long diatribe, but that's kind of what I do for the company. So let me stop sharing because that was all the pictures or slides that I had together. And I will open it up if want to go into more detail, questions, thoughts, whatever direction y'all want to go in. I'll be glad to comment or answer questions or whatever you'd like.
Thanks so much, Scott. Again, if you have questions, feel free to unmute and ask, or you can put them in the chat window. Either way.
Mr. Cobranchi, I saw that you listed regulatory environmental reporting. What are some unique values or factors that y'all report, particularly to these groups, CDP or EVO?
That's a good question. All right, so by all means, please just call me Scott, right? We're all colleagues here, so everybody's a first name basis. Some of the things we report, the easy answer is everything. Okay, so, all right, so things like greenhouse gas emissions, right? So you would say, and if I go off on a tangent and I start talking about stuff that you guys are not as familiar with, or you need me to explain something, please interrupt and tell me, or if I'm covering something in too much detail, let me know. So like if we look at greenhouse gas emissions that we report, right? So we report from CDP, we report scope 1, 2, and 3, right? And typically that's what most companies would do. So because you can't, you want to focus on your scope 1 because those are greenhouse gas emissions you control. It's part of your process. You probably want to focus on 2 because that's from the electricity or energy you use to run your factories and plants and buildings, et cetera, right? So you want to do that. But then for things like companies like Sealed Air, those are okay. And we can control those and those are reasonable. Where our biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions are scope 3. Our raw materials that we use, the goods and services, our transportation, everything that goes into it. Now, when you think about how you're reporting that, we're reporting at hundreds of locations in laborious detail for all of them, trying to track all that information down. We need to track down all the energy that we use. And then like we're working on CDP water right now that I'm working on. I have to look at things like how much, we have 100 manufacturing sites scattered throughout the world. I have to look at things like how much water we use. Where do we get that water from? Is it pulled from a well? Is it pulled from a river? Is it from the local municipality, or whatever it might be? How much do you discharge? What temperature is that when you discharge? You know, do you monitor turbidity or solids when you discharge it? Where does it go when you discharge it? So it's a tremendous amount of information, and that's just really just scratching the surface of the technical aspect of it. It's not something that just Terry Grill and I do ourselves. I mean, we have consultants, we have companies that track some of this information, like our energy usage at every location. We have companies that prepare that information for us, but we have to condense it down and number crunch it and try and figure out what it might be. So that's part of it. So that's kind of the technical aspect. Now, not necessarily reporting for regulatory, but information we're tracking is all our customers and their goals and activities and what's important to them. And also there's a lot, it's almost overwhelming at times, the amount of information, and sometimes the real challenge is boiling it down into a usable format where you can convey something to somebody. So hopefully that answers your question.
Oh, yes, that was very interesting. Now, mind if I ask a follow-up question too?
Not at all. Fire away.
Are you able to name any brands that Sealed Air slash I think as you mentioned, one of your products is Cryovac?
Mm-hmm.
Like any brands I'll see in the store that I'm immediately able to see?
You ever mess with bubble film? Have you gotten anything from Amazon lately?
Oh, definitely.
All right, so probably if you look at those, either came with dunnage paper. Sometimes they're just paper thrown in a box. We make that. The bubble film, we make that. the air pillows, and you'll have to look because it'll be a name brand on it. We don't have like all the Amazon business, but those kind of square pillows that you see in there, we make those. Trying to see what well, let's see. Well, you won't see our name on it because it's really behind the scenes, but just about all the COVID vaccines are shipped around the world in our material. The boxes, this, and it's not the Johnson & Johnson one because it's shipped at a different temperature, but all the ultra low temperature ones, the Modernas and all that, and the Pfizers, those are shipped in our materials because we also make some very, very low temperature cold chain type coolers that they can use over and over again to ship the vaccines. If you go in the grocery store, the joke used to be too, if it hangs on a peg, it's probably ours. So all the cheese packages, shredded cheese and things like that, it won't say Cryovac or sealed air on it, but that's typically our material. And then anything in a deli case, like the big turkey that they would slice up for sandwiches, we sell a lot of that type of material. So hundreds and hundreds of products that are just kind of out there. What else
Hi,
can I
hi, I'm Habib Al-Matar, and I'm a senior major in mechanical engineering and physics. And I'm wondering, so what is the long-term goal for sustainability? So what impact are we or sustainable company try to achieve like in the long run?
Oh, that's a good question, because if you asked 100 companies, you'd probably get 100 different answers, right? Because um, there's so many facets to it. If you had to boil it down for sustainability, where most companies focus is greenhouse gas emissions, water, things like that, right? Um, the big player, which is getting a lot of attention right now, is carbon neutrality. You know, keeping global warming under 1.5 degrees by 2050. That is a crazy hard challenge to meet. There's so much activity, and realistically, if you look at it, and most time if you're familiar with science-based target initiative, and that's an organization that companies use to track all of their greenhouse gas emissions, and more importantly, their improvements or reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in order to stop the planet from warming up more than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. So in other words, we're trying to stop global warming, which is a pretty big target to hit. It's like saying, well, just solve world hunger. Just go ahead and do that. You have to do it in bits and pieces, and you have to start now, because most companies, the goal is to be carbon neutral by 2040 or 2050. But believe it or not, it's right around the corner. If we don't start now trying to figure out how to solve that problem, we're not going to make it. And the risk you run is it gets beyond control, that you can't bring it back. There's a point of no return in that journey. And so we need to get on it hard and fast. So that's probably where you hear companies talk about it the most, who are really serious about this, is if they say, what's your plan? What are you doing? From a packaging side of things, it's things like, and from our customers too, it's the same idea for our customers. It's things like, we want all our materials to be recyclable, reusable, or compostable by 2025. And you say, okay, well, yeah, just recycle it. It's not that simple, right? It's easy to recycle paper. It's easy to recycle a can because it's a monolithic material. It's one material, right? If you look at most of our packaging materials, it's multiple polymers, multiple layers. We do all sorts of things to process it to make it survive the process and protect the food or protect the product that we're shipping. Makes recycling very challenging. But the idea is you're going to have to figure out ways how to make that recyclable. So that's another big goal for companies. The other would be incorporation of recycled content in it. And as an engineer, I think you would appreciate, and we have lots of engineers who work on these things. When we do product development, we have to figure out how to put virgin plastic into a package is pretty straightforward. It's challenging. I mean, it's not trivial, believe me, but we got that process ironed out. Trying to do the same thing with recycled content changes entirely, right? The material doesn't quite behave the same way. There's all sorts of other issues you have to address. So being able to incorporate recycled content into our material is also a big challenge and a big goal of the company. And then along with that is sourcing that information, sourcing that material. It's all well and good for NGOs and everybody to say, oh, just put recycled content in your package. You know, we want 50% recycled material in the package. Available. Nobody's selling it. There's not clean material that you can buy and put in a package because the recycle industry in this country is really struggling. It just doesn't have enough material to recycle to make that material to put into new packages. So trying to figure out how to improve that. How do you get that recycle? How do you get that uptake? How do you get consumers to buy into it? And everything that goes along with it is also a big part of what we do. What else can I tell you guys?
I'm just just to make sure I'm reading into this correctly. It said that you joined in 2019, so I'm not sure if you're able to answer this, but I remember around late 2017, 2018, China restricted their imports on plastic waste. With sealed air, any special issues y'all had to consider?
Not directly, but indirectly. Right. So China sword was the policy, right? So, and you're exactly right. They basically shut down importing of the planet's waste, really, but a lot of the U.S. plastic waste that they were accepting. And so directly it didn't impact us because it's not like we take material and do something with it, then we got to figure out what to do with the waste, because it's when it goes to our customers, we don't have it anymore, so we don't control it. Indirectly, it was a huge problem, and it continues to be a huge problem, is how it impacts recycling in the country. You know, what we were just talking about, sourcing recycled resin to put into your package. Like, say, and some of them are pretty good, right? So if you said, can you get PET, can Coca-Cola get PET so they can make bottles from recycled PET? They can't get enough of it, but PET recycling is one of the better ones in this country. It's still miserably low. I mean, you know, you look at recycling rates in the US, it's somewhere in like 17%. We're not very good at it, you know, and for any number of reasons. But when China sword was kind of thrown out there and enacted, it really put a hurting on recycle industry. Now, the thing about it, it's that, you know, unless you've dealt with recyclers or whatever, you may not be aware of is, and this is kind of silly for me to say this, recycling is a business. It's a business like any other business, right? It's not done out of the goodness of their heart. They may care about the environment and they believe in the mission, but it's a business. And when that business fails to make money, guess what happens? It's no longer a business. It goes under. And so most recyclers run at a loss. They might barely scratch even, but most run at a loss. So, like, give you an example, the one here in Mecklenburg County, if you've ever been to the MRF here, it's an interesting facility to go to, and they do a great job. They may make $50 a ton for the material they recycle. It costs them $100 a ton to recycle it. It costs them $35 a ton to landfill it. So if you said from a financial standpoint alone, they shouldn't recycle anything. They should just landfill everything, right? It's cheaper, but that's not what we're doing, right? The MRF makes the $50. Mecklenburg County supplements that with another $50 to cover their expenses. But with China sword, it made that even more challenging because MRFs had a hard time getting rid of materials, and companies had a harder time selling off their products to be recycled. So it kind of put a big pause on a lot of it and did a lot of damage to recyclers. It's starting to come back now that recyclers have found that there's so much demand for good, clean, recycled polymer that they could demand a premium for it. So say for a typical low density polyethylene stream, you might pay $1 a pound for that material if you were buying it on the market and as a raw material, as a virgin material. If you were buying good, clean, low density recycled material, you have to pay $1.25 a pound. So there's 25% upcharge in it because demand is outstripping the supply. So it's starting to turn around. It's going to take it a while to turn around. I mean, even if you could get every drop of recycled polymer and stuff, there's not enough to make all the packaging that everybody needs, whether it's food packaging, shipping things, plastic bumpers for cars, or whatever it might be. There's just not enough out there.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciated that cynical viewpoint. It was fantastic.
Well, I like to think it's not, I hope I didn't come across as too cynical. Um, it's, I'll put it this way, as a former scientist, I've always tried to be pragmatic in my approach to things, right? I like to base my decisions on fact, and I like to look at things pragmatically. I don't have an emotional tie to what we do. I like what we do. I like what I do. I believe in what Sealed Air does. I think there's real value in it. But I would call Sealed Air out when I think they're wrong. I think when something's not right, I'll tell you it's not right and things like that. So I like to think that I look at this pragmatically and that it's realistic. It's not a perfect world. It's not a perfect system. There's lots of opportunity for improvement, and we're all going to have to really improve to get this ship going in the right direction.
We can only try our best, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Sometimes, and that's a good point. I like how you say that, because if you don't start now, you're never going to get there, and it's never going to be perfect. And and I've been in meetings with some of these NGOs, and I had somebody from an NGO one time in a meeting go, well, we're just going to ban your materials, and I bet you if we threatened your business, you'd come up with a solution. And I'm looking at this person, I'm like, if I had that solution in my back pocket, if I could make a plastic material that was 100% recyclable, and it didn't weigh anything, and it was invisible, and it was impervious, and all the things you imagine we should be able to do, don't you think I would have been selling it and cornering the market and owning, putting everybody else out of business? If those things existed, we would have done it. It's not easy. It's not a trivial solution. There's not an obvious answer, but you have to do it a step at a time, because if you don't start now, and we used to kid that Sealed Air with a lot of companies, we all have goals in 2025. By 2025 we will have this, and 2025 we'll have that. We're all going to quit our jobs in 2024 December because we may not make it. We're going to try. We may not make it, but we'll try as hard as we can. We'll do everything we can to make those goals and to accomplish what we want. We may not get there, but you know what? At least we'll be improving. What else we have?
So you mentioned that it's hard to go sustainable. So why is it challenging? Is it like the technical aspect, or is it like financially, or what makes it hard?
Now, when you talk about, you mean for like sustainable materials, or?
Yeah, so for example, like why oil companies or energy companies don't go sustainable or have like common goals, since it's like for I guess like for the good of humanity. So
Yeah, and I think
so
probably
what I'm asking is like why there is a fight, since it's like a common goal there.
it is, and I don't think any of them are fighting it. I think it's a matter of what it can be, a little bit of everything you've mentioned, right? It could be financial, right? I could sell Aldi a new type of tray that is more sustainable than the tray that they're using for their chicken breasts now, right? And I mean, that's a real product, and they sell that if you've ever been in an Aldi or a Lidl or any of those stores, right? So they have boneless chicken breasts in those trays. We could sell them a more sustainable tray. It's going to cost them 25% more than their standard tray. Okay, you figure, well, so what? Aldi makes about 2% profit a year. Grocery stores make a minuscule profit percentage wise. They make all their money on churn, more stuff, more stores sell more stuff, and a little bit on every sale, a few pennies on every sale. And in the end, they make their money. So some of it is financial. They can't afford some of those sustainability efforts, that it's going to kill them financially. So part of that might be a challenge for people to buy into. Other parts of it may be, and if you look at the oil companies, whatever, that's a tough nut to sell, right? That telling ExxonMobil not to sell oil is not going to go over very well, right? Now, are they doing something about it? Yeah, they're devoting resources to develop alternative energy sources so that they could be profitable on those as well. But those are real difficult technical challenges. And it's going to take a while to do that. To do that at scale is going to require a tremendous amount of effort and investment, both time, money, and effort. So, to want to solve that, yes, and they're moving in that direction, but it's going to take years, many years. It's not something you could just turn on a dime and say, we'll just switch to solar. Yeah, but that may take 30 years before you can really do that. Now, could you put in solar panels tomorrow? Yeah. And are they doing it? Sure. But are they going to be able to do it enough at scale to put them out of the oil business and put them in the solar business? That won't happen. It won't happen in my lifetime. It may happen in yours, but that's going to take decades to do. So there are all sorts of challenges to that. Now, what you do want to do is, and we belong to trade organizations to do this, we work with our competitors to make sure that we're going in the same direction they're going in, and we're all going in the same direction. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing. So there is some cooperation. What you don't see is that it's not really done out in the open in the public, right? Sealed Air doesn't want to tell you all about how we work closely with Berry Plastics to solve the packaging issues of the world. We might work with them in a trade organization we belong to, but we're not going to publicize that. We'll talk about how we work with the trade organization, but we won't necessarily, ExxonMobil won't be talking about how they work with Dow on, how to make packaging better or how to make polymers better or whatever it might be. It's a pretty rare occurrence. But the only one I've heard that got out in the public was one of the companies had designed for a toothpaste tube. It was a recyclable toothpaste tube, which is actually a real challenge, but they said they would share the technology with all their competitors. And I have to apologize to the company, whoever it was, I can't remember who it was, but they were going to share that technology because they felt it was the right thing to do. And realistically, it's kind of a safe thing to do because I don't know about you guys, but I don't buy toothpaste based on the tube. I don't really care what tube it comes in as long as it comes in something. It's the toothpaste itself. So that one, it's not going to really damage them if other people have those tubes. It's not quite such a huge marketing advantage for them. So, but for them to share it that's a pretty cool thing to do. That's nice. It's the right thing to do for the environment. So there is some of that back there. It's just not always out in the open as much.
Scott, real quick, we've got time for one more question, and this one got chatted to me, and I wanted you to go over it because you and I were talking about this before everybody arrived. Just all the different various jobs related to sustainability in a corporation like Sealed Air. Can you go over those real quick just to give folks a sense?
Yeah, sure. Sure, there's any number of them, right? So I mean, you've heard a lot about what I do and then what other people do. So there's the scientist in you. If you're heart of hearts, you want to be a scientist. There's LCA work that you can do, and to be honest, I barely scratch LCA work. I do a fair amount of it, but it's compared to people who really do that for a living, which is really complex and really an impressive amount of work. You can do that scientist work. If you're more of a creative, right? I spoke to a student at my alma mater that he wanted to talk about, and he was into videography and making movies and things like that, but also sustainability. And he was wondering, are there opportunities there? And we were brainstorming about companies that do that, because that's a big part of telling that story. So you could be that. It could be public relations. It could be if you like to engage with customers, you could be on the customer facing side. When we used to travel, I probably traveled maybe 3-4 times a month, where I would be visiting customers directly and going to meet with them to discuss sustainability issues and things. And it's kind of a fun part of the job. I get to fly around the country and go to Canada and go to California and whatever, and meet with customers and see their operations and talk to them about it. So if you're more about that people interface, you can be in that aspect of it. If you're into the marketing aspect of it, if you're into, designing logos and trying to tell that story, and realistically, we kid around, but realistically, if you said, all right, what doesn't sustainability touch and big companies? Not much. It touches just about everything. There's always going to, particularly going forward, there'll be a little bit of sustainability in everything. That's part of the story. You have to embed that, whether it's from the very start of R&D or all the way to here's the product, how I show it to a customer. Sustainability has to be part of that story, because I can guarantee you'll be asked about it at some point. And if you're not doing it, you're going to be, as a company, you're going to be at a real disadvantage. So bigger company, and it's small companies, all companies, it's going to be more and more part of their story and part of what they want to do. So you guys are in a good spot. I mean, you talk about a hot field. Sustainability is very hot right now, and the opportunities are boundless for you guys. So I'm a bit jealous being an older guy and seeing this. I kind of fell into it, but you guys are in a really good spot if you're looking at that. And even if you're not, even if you're more on the engineering side or whatever it might be, you're going to have to think about sustainability as you're doing that engineering, as you're designing that process, as because the company's going to expect that. I'm designing a new flow system, or a new pump, or whatever it might be. They're going to want to know about how much energy you're burning. Can you make it more energy efficient, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to touch on everything we do going forward.
That is wonderful. Well, Scott, thank you again so much for your great information and for sharing time with us today. And thanks, students, for asking such good questions. It's been a really enlightening conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity. But thanks for the engagement, guys. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed talking with you.
All right. Everybody have a great afternoon.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.